Welcome to the Fit Dad Nation podcast, forging strong fathers and raising a stronger generation. It's time to get up or shut up with your host, Steve Roy.
Hey guys, this is Steve Roy, host of the Fit Dad Nation podcast. Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. So before I introduce today's guest, I just want to take a moment to invite all you dads who are listening right now. If you're ready to start taking action on reclaiming your health and your fitness and becoming a better father and a better man, to join our free online community, the best way to do that is to apply to our private Facebook group, which can be found at fitdadnation.com/community. So my guest today is someone I found recently through another podcast interview, and her story really resonated with me. Her name is Emily McCarthy, and she's a former CIA case officer spending time in war-torn Africa post 9/11. And following her time in the U.S. government, she co-founded GORUCK, which is an American brand with roots in intelligence and special forces, and they run pretty unique challenges and events all over the world. So it's really a cool thing. So, Emily, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Steve. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. So I have two daughters, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. They're 14 and 11, and the most important thing to me is being a good dad. And so the interview that you did with Larry Hagner for the Dad Ed podcast about raising mentally tough and confident daughters, it really resonated with me. And so that's one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on here, because I loved your story. I loved how you shared how you were raised by your father. And I'm fascinated by the GORUCK story too. So, yeah, I'd love to hear, more about those things. But, maybe we could just first start with a little bit of your backstory and tell us who you are.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Before I get into that, I just wanted to say we just celebrated my dad's birthday. It's on March 8th. And, he would have been 68. He died suddenly when he was 49. And it's, it's also International Women's Day. That kind of became more popular later on. It wasn't something that we associated with his birthday when he was alive. But since then, it kind of carries this double meaning for me, as someone who, as a father, he always treated me equal to my brother and to other kids, and really made me feel like I was capable and able of doing so much. And I don't think I took it for granted then. I knew it was different then than maybe some other relationships that my friends had with their fathers. But now as an adult looking back on that, it really changed my life, and it continues to guide a lot of what I do to this day. So I just wanted to say that because I was just thinking about that. So yes, I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I've been thinking a lot about sort of family life. Read a really interesting article by David Brooks about the nuclear family and how it's just not really as functional. It's actually really hard. We need to rely on each other a little bit more, and I'll get into that later about GORUCK and in the communities that we build and what you're doing with Fit Dad Nation. But I had a rather normal upbringing. I had two parents, middle class. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a mortgage loan officer. And then I have a younger brother. And, early on, there were times when my mom would tell me, we really need to cut a lot of coupons and we need to cut back. Going to the grocery store, or, we didn't ever take lavish vacations. The first time I ever got on a plane was to go visit family in Arizona. And that was a really big deal when I was about, I want to say 8. So, and any trip after that was sort of something that, like, my mom as a French teacher got, discounted rates or something like that. So, nothing like, what happens today. But yes, my dad had opportunities in his career to travel more and to probably spend more time away from home, but he continually chose not to do that. And he would tell my mom, and sometimes, we would be in the car driving places, and I would listen on to their conversations, and he would say, I just don't want to spend time away from my family. I don't want someone else raising my kids. And now as a parent, I see these choices that we make every day, right? In terms of the presence that the presence we have in our children's lives and the difference that it makes. We didn't have a ton of babysitters outside of family growing up. And that was not because my parents didn't, have their careers and do the work they needed to do. They didn't work from home. They went to an office, but there was some built-in flexibility that my father had as a loan officer to, make sure that he was always there to take us to school and make our lunches. And he was always there at our sporting events or any sort of after school or in-school activity. Like I have friends that to this day would say, I never saw your dad miss one of your soccer matches. I never saw him miss a track meet. Never saw him miss a tennis match. And that's something really special to me with those memories that I still have today.
Yeah, I mean, and you make some good points. I mean, I think about those things all the time. I see a lot of dads that they get so busy with life and career and other things, and it kills me to see that. And because I'm divorced and I have my girls 50% of the time, so when I was married, I never really thought about that, and so I don't think married men can understand what it's like not to be able to see your kids, so they take it for granted. And some, they're busy on Sundays watching football down in the man cave all day, and where their kids are doing something else, and they spend a few minutes with them at night before bedtime. And so after my divorce and not being able to see them for a certain amount of time, it really brought to light how little time I have with them. So now, I'm with them. When I'm with them, I'm with them. We're constantly out doing stuff, and it's not about the things they have, it's about the experiences. So my whole goal is just to give them experiences. And it's huge. I mean, and I would love my girls one day to look back and say the things that you said about your father. Yeah. Because they're not going to remember, their best day of television or any of that stuff. It's not going to matter, right? It's my dad we used to go out on our bikes and play this game. Like we have this spy game that we play with walkie-talkies across the street in this neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And people are like, well, you're not their playmate. And I'm like, well, I kind of am. Like, I want to be their playmate. Like, I want to go do these things, and I've got a lot of people. I'm like, they, let them go play with their friends. And I'm like, well, I don't want them to let them play with. I mean, there's a time for that, yes, but I want to be with them. Like, my time is so valuable with them, and I'm not willing to just send them off to a play date or something else. I want to be with them.
I think that's the right answer. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. You can, I mean, my father, I have all these great memories of my father organizing a game of touch football, basketball games. And our house, even though it wasn't the nicest, it was, it was always filled with kids, because my dad was always sort of organizing something fun. And that doesn't mean he was, over the top. It just would be like he kind of set it in motion, and then he sort of sat back and let things play out, and not hover, and it wasn't like a helicopter parent situation. I think sometimes we parent thinking, sometimes less is more, in the sense that, but you still need to be there, right? You still need to be watching and, getting it going. And, but it was so fun, because he would get these games started, and the moment that, something, he would just say, no, this is how you do that. This is the rule. If there was an argument, like he was somewhat of an authority of like, you let it work itself out, but no, actually, this is technically a foul, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it just, you're right to want to play. And I think those relationships, being with your kids doesn't, you can do something like this cool spy game, which I totally did when I was, younger, and it's super fun. And then you can also do things that you like, because, they're going to learn from you. And, you can have these moments together where, you say, hey, I like to go fishing. Let's go together. And that you're going to find out that kid's going to look back on that and say, wow, I learned a lot, from those experiences and that time we had together. I was just thinking the other day, my husband's always like, why do you always write these notes in the kids' lunches? Can we just make the lunches, hurry up, basically, it's late. And I look at him and I say, my dad always wrote me a note in my lunch. And it was just a small note. Sometimes it was like a little comic strip he cut out. Sometimes it just said, have a great day, love, Dad. Sometimes, it just was a sticker and a heart from him. And it really changed my day. It was just a small gesture that, it doesn't matter what was going on at school. It just made me smile. It gave me a thought that doesn't matter what, a grade I got on a test or how mean that kid was to me or, what's going on, that someone loves me and someone is in my court, in my corner for me. And I do this for my kids. And the other day, Jason used to give me a hard time for this, but then he finally said, you know what, I get it. I get gestures, they're not, like you said, they're not going to remember, the TV program or even that expensive gift. They're going to remember the time you invested in them.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. And so, what comes to mind is when, I read your story and I'm listening to some of the podcasts you've been on, and, you've done a lot. You've had some phenomenal experiences. You've been all over the world. You're in the CIA. You went to Georgetown. Very successful. You have this massive global brand now in GORUCK. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how much of that you think is related to the confidence and what you learned as a kid. It doesn't have to be just from your dad, but,
right.
The way you were raised, because a lot of people, when they grow up, they don't have that innate confidence to go out and just kick ass and do these amazing things and travel to crazy places like Africa. You've had so many experiences and now, you've got 3 children and you're married to the love of your life and you guys are just thriving. Right. And, that's what I want for my kids. I mean, that's what you want, right? You want them to grow up and just go out and just blow it up, right? And just love their life.
Yes.
I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts on how you became the person you are today, through, some of the lessons that you've learned, maybe we'll talk specifically about your father and some of the things that he taught you and kind of you grew into that as an adult.
Yes, no, I'm always happy to talk about my father, my upbringing. And, it just goes without saying, my mom was a big part of this too. It's just, my father was, if you asked any member of my family, both immediate and extended, they would tell you, he was really he was just a personality and he made everyone feel special. And that's something that I think is a real gift. So I think it started from day one. My mom tells me stories about how he just doted on his children and he loved having a daughter. I think, most dads can relate to this, it's just a special bond. Mm-hmm. And, I always just have these memories of wanting to be with him. If he was out in the yard mowing the yard, if he was mowing the yard with his shirt off, I wanted to be mowing the yard with my shirt off, as a young kid. And he was okay with it. And I think that's something, I wasn't put into, even back in the 80s when it was still pretty gender specific on things, like he was fine with me doing all these things like, that boys would do. And, my mom still had her say, but I really gravitated towards that. I was a bit of a tomboy and sports were just a big part of our life because they were a big part of his life. He was a great football player, great basketball player, great baseball player. Ended up going to college on a scholarship to play football at Memphis, but it just he didn't love the sport that it ended up being in college with a lot of steroids and stuff. So he ended up walking away with that and then going to a school and meeting my mom. But he, I think that was a big part of it, because any sort of gift was basically a piece of sporting equipment, So it's something you have to actually do something with. And it's one thing to give someone something, but it's another thing to actually say, hey, let's go carve out time and use it together. So that's something that was always part of our life. And he was the coach of my basketball team. I was on a boys team growing up, and it wasn't always easy. I got teased by the boys on my team sometimes. And he would just say to me after these practices or these games, he would say, listen, you belong out there, and you're just going to have to be tough, because I'm here with you and I will help you. But he basically just reminded me every bit along the way, I'm here for you and you can do this. And I started to believe it. I started to just say, I just started standing up for myself at an early age. I mean, I went to a public school. It was a little rough on the edges in parts. And, I remember kids getting their stuff stolen out of their lunch. And I remember this one kid came around and stole like a cookie out of my bag. And I stood up to that person and said, you give that back to me. And they gave it back, and it's like, you get feedback on these type of incidents over the years. I've talked about in 8th grade. It was in middle school. I wasn't yet in 8th grade. I tried out for the basketball team as a 7th grader. And I got, during the tryouts, basically pinned against the locker room wall by a bunch of older girls on the team, and said, if you show up again tomorrow, we're going to beat you up, because they knew I was good enough to make the starting 5, which meant one of them wouldn't make the team. And I went home and I told my dad, and he was like, you're going to go back tomorrow. And I said, I was a little nervous, but I was like, okay. I trusted him, right? We had 13 years of building trust with each other. I knew he wasn't going to let me down. I knew if he said he was going to be somewhere, he was. There wasn't going to be a last minute meeting that got in the way, or, something. He was going to prioritize me. And he sure enough showed up whenever it was like 4:30 for this practice. I skipped going to the locker room, because he and I had worked this out. He's like, just after school, go to the bathroom, change there. And I went to the practice, and, afterwards he kind of escorted me out, took me to the car. I made the team, and guess what? In a week, those girls, they respected me. And by the end of the season, they were my best friends. And no one wanted to mess with me, right? I didn't have any sort of those issues, because I had established that early on. Middle school's a tough time. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of, sort of social jockeying, and really being confident is one of the best things you can do to prepare your kids for middle school, and then of course for life. So it was a really big thing. And I remember 8th grade was really instrumental to me. I got recognized for a lot of things in academics and athletics. And I remember kind of at that point, I felt, I can do a lot of these things. I felt capable. I didn't know everything. I was still curious and wanted to learn more. It wasn't like I thought I had everything figured out, but I had enough confidence to look into what was going to happen, down the line, and start to dream big. That's when Silence of the Lambs came out, and I was like, I want to be Jodie Foster. She's such a badass. Yeah. My dad would say, you can do that. He's like, that'd be awesome. I think you'd be great at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where he left it. It wasn't like, well, let me put you in this court. It was just like, you can do that. That went a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to be said for, being your child's biggest cheerleader. I think that's important. And, the power of sticking to your word, like you said. If he said he was going to be somewhere, he was there. I kind of live like that as well. And so I'm curious to hear too, because one of my main goals as a father is not only to, be in their corner and build them up, but have them look at me as a confidant. Like my youngest and I have kind of I would say a different relationship than I have with my oldest, and she's much more open with her feelings and thoughts. And people are amazed at like, wow, your daughter told you that? She comes to me, and the second I see her, she just opens up, and like the stuff that, I mean, some of this stuff you're like, oh my God, where is she? Like, it's very personal questions, very curious, but she feels comfortable enough to know that I'm not going to judge her. I'm not going to punish her if she says the F word. I heard the F word. I heard this about sex. And I'm like, first of all, you don't be listening to this in, fifth grade. You shouldn't be hearing about this. But the fact is she is. But she's coming to me and talking to me and say, Dad, what is this? What does this mean? Is this true? Someone told me this. And that's what I'm really trying to foster is I want that, when she gets into the teenager years, she can come to me and say, Dad, I was offered drugs, or Dad, I tried this, or I had a sip of alcohol.
Yeah.
And know that I'm not going to fly off the handle and freak out, punish her, and judge her. It's, thank you for sharing this, and now we can talk about it. That's so important to me. So did you have that relationship too? I mean, could you go to your dad and say, Dad, I'm struggling with this, or Dad, this is really bothering me?
Absolutely. Yes. And, it manifested. I was still kind of a private person. I see it now in my daughter. She's similar. She trusts me, but there's certain things that she doesn't really want to talk about. The birds and the bees, that makes her uncomfortable. But we will touch on it and we will discuss it. She just doesn't want to go into a lot of detail, unlike, maybe some of her friends or someone who's really gregarious and open about those types of things. But at the same time, there were plenty of other topics that I did feel that sort of support. And I'll give you an example. My dad, he was he always wanted us to be safe. He didn't just leave us with anyone. He wouldn't just let anybody drive us. I'm the same way with my kids. It's just, statistically it's very dangerous. So especially if they're young kids driving. And I remember him telling me, hey, if you ever want to try anything to drink or anything, you can just let me, he sometimes offer it to me. And I just had said, no, I'm not interested. And I wasn't. But he would always say, if you ever get into a bad spot, I don't care what's going on, you call me. A lot of parents say this, right? But I did get into a bad spot a couple times. There was in ninth grade. This is a public school party, and my mom's very social. She was always like, go to the parties, and kind of pushing me to go out, do more. And I kind of went. I didn't know what it was going to be like, and it ended up going downhill really fast. There was a lot of drinking going on that I wasn't expecting. It wasn't in a great part of town. It was close to the school, but I didn't realize where it was going to be. Some friends took me there. My dad was like, hey, just call me if you need me, sort of thing. And, I just remember hearing some people get into a fight and then someone threatening to bring a weapon. And as soon as I heard that, I ran into a bathroom, pulled an old rotary phone, still connected to the wall, through the bathroom, locked myself in, and called my dad. And I said, hey, I just need you to come pick me up right now. It's like, I'm on my way. So he came to pick me up. I ran outside, I got in the car and, I told him what happened, and he was like, yeah, that you did the right thing. And, we won't do this again, sort of thing. And, there was later that year, there was a school shooting that, unfortunately killed one of my classmates. And then there was a second shooting, in the spring of that same school year. And after that, my dad brought me an application to a private school, and I switched, for my sophomore year, which was hard because I was president of my class. I was number one in my class. I was playing all these sports. I had kind of figured out a way to make it work in this larger public school. But after those incidences, it just felt like everything at school was a distraction from what I wanted it to be. And so my parents, really they remortgaged the house. They figured out a way to send both my brother and me to this expensive private school. And that was a whole nother journey because I wasn't worried about safety anymore, but I had to really work hard to basically keep up, because came in a little bit behind. It was a college preparatory school just to give you an example, in public school in ninth grade at this huge school, I would basically sneak off to the library to go do homework or read during lunch. Would eat my peanut butter and jelly in the bathroom because the cafeteria was just a nightmare. It was just a lot of drama. There was just nothing. I couldn't study. It was people would take my books and run around with it. It was too much. And so I'd sneak off. I was the only person in that library besides the librarian. And of course she knew me because my mom taught at the same school. And when I got to this new prep school, I would go into the library and not be able to find a seat. And I was shocked, but it was great for me in so many ways because it really, pushed me even more to challenge myself.
Where was the school?
Well, the first one was in Jacksonville in just a public school where my mom taught for years. And then the second one is it's called the Bowles School. It's where I actually met Jason. He was like one of the first people I met sophomore year when I started as a new student.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love the story of how you were able to call your dad, because as when kids get a certain age, that teenager, some year, the peer relationship becomes so powerful, right? And a lot of kids aren't going to have the wherewithal to reach out to their parents and say, listen, there's some bad shit going on here. I need to get out of here. A lot don't, right? And plus a lot don't want to because it's not cool, right? I mean, they want to be cool. They want to fit in more than anything else in the world. They want to fit in. So we've developed a code phrase for my oldest. Say, if you're ever out somewhere and you're in a position that you don't want to be in, you're not going to text and say, Dad, come pick me up. I don't like it, because she said, well, my friends might see it. And I said, I get that. So we have a code, a phrase, it has nothing to do with anything, but it tells me it's time to go. And then I will in turn text you or call you and say, hey, we've got this going on. You need to come home. And so then it's not on her. Like I wanted to leave. It's, my dad is telling me I have to go. And so, it's kind of a win-win there. So I think that's
it is. Yeah. I love that. I love the signaling. I love the, I families should even do this in other situations, right? In more extreme situations like a hostage situation and things like that, and have these sort of code words to know, to not, broadcast what's actually going on, but actually discreetly telling. I think that's a great advice, and I'm glad that you're doing that. I remember another time, this was towards the end of ninth grade, I got into a car to get a ride home, and I didn't really. It was like, again, it was one of these situations that just kind of popped up, and I remember being in the back of this girl's car. And she was driving really fast. And I was like, it was like a 300Z Nissan, whatever they are. And it had no seatbelt for me in the back. I was so nervous. And as soon as I got home, I told my parents about it. And I said, I don't want to do that again. It felt wrong. It felt like, I was going to die. And my parents were not planning to get me a car when, when I got older, I got my license, and I wasn't going to, argue about it because they were going to already be spending all this money to me to go to the school, which seemed to me like more important at the time. So I just shrugged it and said, that's okay. But my dad went to my mom and said, we're going to figure out a way to get her a safe vehicle because, if she's making better decisions than the other kids back there, that's I want to be able to make sure that she has the tools she needs to have. And so, they made sacrifices for this. I mean, a lot of their friends at the time, my mom would tell me, they were like, why are you doing this for your kids? Why are you, don't you want to get a new house or a new car? And my parents telling me, sending these messages to my brother and me about what was important
that's what we continue on to with our children, right? It's like, it's learned behavior. It's like, that was an example that was set in terms of what do we value in our lives. And it really became about spending time with one another and realizing, material things, you have to have you have to have shelter and you have to have transportation, but maybe you don't need, the fanciest or the biggest. Maybe you need to think about it in a way where you're going to be able to, give your daughter who's almost driving age a safe vehicle, so she's not, having to get rides with just whoever who maybe they are not going to be as safe as she will be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Listening to the way you were raised, it's so far off from how I was raised, and so, my fear has always been replicating my own childhood in theirs, because my childhood was horrible. My parents were divorced when I was 6. My mother took us, my brother and I, to New Hampshire from California. My dad stayed in California. I only saw him every summer my whole life. So we went out every summer. And all we did was play. So we went out. It was sports, ball games, Magic Mountain, Disneyland, SeaWorld. There was no discipline because there was no need to discipline. There were no life lessons. It was, let's play sports. So we got athletic. We had a great time. And then we went back to New Hampshire for most of the year where I grew up. I was miserable. I hated it. I just didn't want to be there. I just wanted to be with my dad. And I didn't have, anybody guiding me because I didn't talk to my mother ever. Didn't want to talk to her. I lost myself in video games. I became super introverted in Nintendo and Atari, all that stuff. And I had very few friends. I didn't date even through high school. Even I didn't go to prom. I never even kissed a girl until I was out of high school. I was so introverted, dorky. It was just a really bad experience for me. All high school was horrible for me. I was bullied through 8th grade, like really bad. I didn't tell anybody, not a friend, not a father, not my mother. Nobody. So I would just lie in bed crying, thinking, oh, tomorrow's the day I'm going to get beat up. Tomorrow's the day. And I never did, but it went on through the whole year. And it just created a lot of problems. And so when I got out of school, I almost went in the Army. I chickened out at the last minute after taking the ASVAB. I did really well. And then I just said, I can't do it. My father said, hey, any college you want to go to, I'll pay for it. He's an academic. He spent his whole career as a professor and researcher at UCLA, and pushed academics. And I said, I'm getting as far away from school as possible. I don't want anything to do with it. Yeah. And my confidence, I didn't have any confidence. So I chose to just be an underachiever. I traveled the country. I bartended. I was a personal trainer everywhere. And I spent that was my life until I was in my 30s. And so, a lot of it has to do with just that whole environment. I literally had no confidence. And so that's absolutely 100% what I don't want for the girls. So it's it's hard. I mean, being a parent, thinking you're doing it right is incredibly difficult. Even when things are going great, you're like, am I just a shitty parent or what? So that's a big thing.
That's really hard.
Yeah,
but look at this. You are a success story. You have figured out a way to use those tough experiences for better. You've learned so much from that. And that's something let me tell you, my upbringing was great, awesome, really safe, but also challenging. And I had a lot of confidence to try new things, and I had the freedom to fail and still have, the right sort of support and safety net. It's a balance, right? We can't hover so much and keep them inside of a glass house that when they go out in the real world, they crumple, right? That's not the goal. And that I wasn't like this. I got my first day in college. I decided I was in DC, and I decided the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing the Baltimore Ravens, and I have a friend that's at Johns Hopkins. I'm going to just go up and see them. And I just did. I didn't, I had no cell phone. I didn't ask permission. I just got on the train and had a great time seeing my friend at the game, or, what. We didn't go to the game. I think we watched it somewhere. We didn't have money to buy a ticket. But then, what hit me is that on the way home, I was like, it's really dark. And I've never been to Baltimore. This is the first time I've ever done this. And I remember coming back and I didn't even know where I was. And I had to, it was like, 9 o'clock at night, I'm in downtown DC. And I ended up, having the number to my dorm and finding my dorm mate and being like, I think I'm lost. I didn't panic. And she's like, hey, I'll send the guy that's from DC down here and he'll meet you at the Ben and Jerry's. And it was silly because I was really close, but it was like, I had no map, no phone, no lifeline. And when I think about it, it's like, you want your kid to be able to do stuff like that, explore without, being stupid about it. Right. I was being careful, was on my guard, but but eventually, the bottom fell out. My dad died suddenly. I tried to resuscitate him. I failed to do so. I struggled for a long time after that. My confidence for a while was shattered, and it took the better part of a decade to put the pieces back together. And the story there is that you can, the time you invest early, great. But if you can you can also, work on yourself. And, this idea of like, you get to try again with your children. And if you're having these sorts of conversations with people and thinking about this, you're doing the right thing, because, you're not going to get so far off doing, being absent from their life or not, talking about the right things. You're going to have time to regroup on that and to make a difference. And I think we all learn through failure a lot more than we learn through success.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard not to be, like you said, helicopter parent, with all the shit that's out there. And it's the hardest thing for me probably is to give them that long leash that, I had one because my mother was never around. She was always working, trying to support us as a single mom. So I did what I'm not. Fortunately, I was a good kid. I actually never got into drugs, drinking, nothing. I was maybe just too scared to do anything, but it's hard. I made a lot of good decisions, but it's so hard to just let them out there with everything that's out there. But you have to, right? You have to give them that leash to fail and to make those bad decisions and learn from it instead of trying to protect them from everything. And that's one of my biggest struggles for sure.
It's hard. I'm in the same boat. I have kids. You understand it completely from the other perspective when you become a parent. And, but I constantly go back to this, less is more. You still need to be a guide. You still need to provide the basics. You need to be present. But, arranging play dates and having everything scheduled in someone's life and not letting them take ownership over who they are and their life, it is one of the big things I try not to do. My parents did not mess around with my schoolwork very much, and they did not arrange play dates for me. If I went somewhere and there were kids there, it's because I was along for the ride, right? And there's a lot that was good about that time. Hey, go outside. I'm not entertaining you, right? And allowing kids time to get bored and get creative. This fun spy game. I bet your girls are probably really good at making it even more so, right?
Mm-hmm.
From their mindset, they're going to be much more creative because they're not copying a movie that you've seen a zillion times about James Bond. They're actually just doing it how they would do it. And some of my best moments growing up are the times when we almost got into a little bit of trouble, but we ended up being okay. It created this sense of like, wow, we handled it. And, it's got to be done in steps. You don't, do something like, hey, I'm just going to drop you in the middle of this downtown area at age 8, kid, figure it out. But you are going to be teaching them life skills along the way. It starts at home with, safety, just your basic safety stuff. And then, you start to say, hey, I'm going to let you go to that person's house by yourself, be back at this time, check in with me when you get there, or whatever. Something my dad always said was, call me when you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned this in my eulogy of him years ago. because it just embodied to me that I care, but I'm going to let you go. Right. And this leash you're talking about, that was the feedback loop. And if we just create enough of those, the leash will get longer, but that call will always come back. And if you have that communication line open with your kids through the, as long as you're alive, what more can we ask for?
Yeah. Yeah. And hearing your relationship with him and, the fact that he died, basically at my age. I mean, he was 49. I'll be 49 in a few months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it terrifies me thinking about what happens if I die. Obviously we can't control the freak accidents, a freak heart attack, or getting hit by a car, or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we can control a lot of things, and so it just reminds me of why it's so important to be doing this work. Is dads are dying in their 40s and 50s from preventable things, and we're just abusing our bodies with food and alcohol and smoking, and so I think about that literally every day. Like, what would my kids' lives be like if I just died? Like, if they didn't have a dad? Right. I mean, that's what keeps me going, thinking I have to be here. Like, not only selfish reasons, like I want to see them grow up. I want to see them have kids. I want to see them get married, all those things. Like, that's so important to me. Mm-hmm. And we can't do that if we're just not taking care of ourselves. Right.
Right.
It's so big. It's so important. Yeah. So, that's really that story, when you told that and I heard it, like, just kills me to hear that. A little girl, or not a little girl, but a girl with her father, you were so close, and just
right.
Yeah, that's terrible.
It was, and but I look back on it and I think, gosh, I had 21 years of my dad, completely and utterly, supporting me and my brother and mother, all of us together. I've never had one inkling of a doubt, like, did he love me? Anything like that. And that's worth so much to me. And it carries me through hard times still to this day. We have to, contemplating mortality is important because it actually helps us to live better. And I see this in, groups of people that, they say, hey, I actually want to take care of myself and be fit and, find ways to make myself happy, and view it as, I'm going to be better serving those that I love. You talk about there is a lot of, despair and stress and, unhappiness, being unfit. And it really clouds, the time that we have together if someone's in this state. And so, finding ways to, say, get out there, work out, make sure you're taking care of yourself, eating right, being with others, sharing your story, sharing your troubles. I mean, we're not meant to parent in isolation, we're not meant to live in isolation. And I know this comes at a time when we're talk about social distancing. Well, that's a different sort of thing. You can still sort of be in a community with people and do so in a safe way. So I think, you're showing people through, your podcast and, getting dads together in your online forum and, setting a good example about what it means to be a good dad and being a good dad. My dad was in great shape. It was a freak accident, how he died. He was always athletic, always ate well. I don't know, maybe there was stress that, contributed to that, but it was also something that he was just really young. And there's something that, we have to at some point be at peace with, if it's our time, it's our time. And that's why every day when we wake up, it needs to be, wow, I have a whole opportunity to make things right. If it's not, it's really, there is a lot to be optimistic about. I mean, I don't know about you, but I apologize to my kids a lot. I actually, I'm still very much the authority figure. I discipline. And I don't sit there out there to entertain them just for the sake of entertaining them, but I also will say, I kind of lost my temper this morning when we were all getting ready and I got a little stressed, and I'm sorry. And kids are so smart. They go, "It's okay, mommy. We understand. We'll try it. We were being a little bit obnoxious, or we were being difficult." And I can have this conversation with my 3-year-old, and he understands. He forgives me. And it's a good point. And, something my dad did is he was vulnerable to us too. He didn't, being a good dad doesn't mean you just have to be, the perfect person all the time. Like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, he still showed up, and sometimes he had to be on a phone call when he's at my match. Did I say, "Oh, that's bad"? No, it's the fact that he was there, if something didn't go right, if he got angry, then, I didn't hold it against him. This is the type of thing, like, everybody, can make these mistakes, and we shouldn't hold them to their feet to the fire because of it. Yeah,
for sure. And so, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is, I'm going to just shift up a little bit, but, the importance of being a good role model from a health standpoint, because, at the end of the day, our health is all we have, and I've seen my kids take on, their own ideas. I mean, my little one writes her own workouts. My oldest one is now doing all stuff on her own. She's going to the gym at 6:00 in the morning, at school on her own. She's looking for recipes, and it's not from like, "Hey, we need to eat healthier because of this," or "You need to lose weight," or anything like that. It's about, this is just how to live healthy. And so the woman that I've been with her, we're not married, but we've been together for 6 years, and she's really stepped into a stepmother role, and we both live a very healthy lifestyle, and we don't push it on them. My oldest goes to the gym with me, and now they've just adopted it, and that's so important. And so good. For you, I see that. I mean, you're obviously at the head of, a massive corporation now of GORUCK, which is based on health. I mean, that's what you guys do, right? You're out there getting healthy in a really positive way in a huge community now. So, I wanted to hear a little bit about that, because, I'm sure there are some people that don't know what it is, but it's just it's a massive brand here, and you guys are out, hiking and marching and doing these events really all over the world, right? I've actually signed up for a few, and things have fallen apart, and I haven't actually done one, but it's certainly on my radar. And so, I want to hear, a little bit about how this thing came out of, him in the military and you in the CIA in Africa, and then all of a sudden we've got this brand, we've got this thing, this idea for GORUCK.
Yeah. Gosh, it was an accident of sorts, but it also is just kind of who we were as people, at the time. I mean, I was in West Africa, posted there, working for the government, and he was looking for what to do so we could be together. And he'd made me a go bag, and I appreciated this, because this is exactly the type of thing my dad would have done, right? So like, hey, I have an expertise in this as, an SF guy. I'm gonna, you're kind of in a dangerous place. I want, if the, shit hits the fan, I want you to be able to bug out. So he made me what he called a GORUCK, and it had, a pair of running shoes in there, some money, some water, a weapon. If, I'm in the middle of like war-torn West Africa, dog supplies for my dog to go with me, copies of documents in case I couldn't, get my passport or something. So he just basically did it like he would have done at war. And it made me feel really safe. And it gave it, even though I was in the middle of something that wasn't great, at the time, when he went back to, be with his team, I felt, gosh, I have one of these in my car and my house, and I'm prepared. So later on, I told him like, hey, you should just do that GORUCK thing. And it was supposed to be something completely different, like building them out as is, completely packed and kind of a security consulting business. And he ended up deciding that, he was going to just build his own rucksack that would be what the GR1 is today, work in, be acceptable in Baghdad, but also look good in New York. And, it took him 2 years to do that. And there was a lot of back and forth. In the meantime, our relationship was tanking for other reasons of not living together. But, the thing is, we always stayed in touch because we were friends, since high school. And, it was really funny to see how it evolved, because he went on this summer tour in 2010 where he visited all these shops thinking they were just going to like want to buy the bags, and it was going to be this like, premier brand. And no one wanted them. They're too expensive. No one knew him. So, this opportunity through Tough Mudder came to like lead a challenge, the first one in San Francisco. And I remember him doing that. And then I helped him plan the second one in DC, because I had good area familiarization with DC from having been a runner there, and then all my, agency training. And so I helped him plan that route. And the whole time I was like, I think you're going to need a permit for this. I don't think you're going to be able to do it. I was like, I don't know about this, but he pulled it off. And then I did the third one ever in New York. And then that's when that's when we started to see, wow, we had to do 2 separate classes because there was too many, that showed up. And it was really something. I was like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe people need, a reason to do social fitness together and have something that's a challenge that's, literally outside of the box or the gym, and you don't really know what to expect, and you have to form together as a team, basic SF principles there. And it ended up evolving over time. And today, now we're looking at, over 300 ruck clubs around the world. We put on almost 1,000 events, and they're smaller events for the most part, but they're team building. And they still have these same sort of, principles where you're supposed to work as a team, you're supposed to communicate as a team, and then you learn leadership skills, like, in like an outdoor laboratory, with people. And, it's just been really great to see it evolve over the years, and being something mostly only men did, and had, a lot of, people changing their lives, because of this. Like, wow, I was really lost in this transition from the military to civilian life, or I just let myself go and, needed something to get me, back into it, or I was struggling with an addiction or going through a divorce. It just really related to a lot of people. And then, we just started getting more and more women hearing about it and coming out, and the same sort of transformations going on with women. And it's just been really, really great to watch and hear these awesome stories of people's lives changed. And, we've now even have events that are more accessible, and there's kids that are coming out there. You see moms doing it with their sons, dads doing it with their daughters, and vice versa. And we had this one little boy did the STAR course. It was the 5K, and he's going to be working up to the 10K and the 15K with his father. And it's just something they do together. They go working together, in their community and their ruck club. And, I lead my own ruck club. It's like a mom's group, but, we're not exclusive. And it's something that I've, as a parent, have used as a tool with my own kids in terms of getting them outside, helping them with maybe their own sort of, behavior stuff they're going through. And, my kids now, they're like, they just know it's like smoothie ruck, Sunday, or smoothie ruck Saturday, depending on the day. They get their little rucks on, and sometimes they ride their scooter. This is the flexibility of being a parent, it's like my daughter sometimes like, oh no, not another ruck. but I just tell her like, hey, this is our life, and this is what we do to stay fit. And, sitting inside reading all day is is not something that's going to be good for you now or later in your life. You got to get out and do something. And she ends up like 5 minutes into it with her friends, laughing and having fun and getting a play date invitation to go to their house next door, you know, and it allows for a lot more opportunity. So we've seen this on, you know, so much, a large spectrum, you know, for the easiest type of events to get started with to, you know, the hardest ones like selection or team assessment, where people set these big goals for themselves and, you know, become better versions of themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. So this rucking, you know, for those that don't really know what it is, basically you're strapping on a pack of some sort, right? Some weighted pack. Yeah. And then it's not, I mean, is it typically just a standard hike, or are we doing obstacles? I mean, I'm sure there are different, you know, you have different events. Some are very challenging, some are shorter.
Right.
Yeah, well, like what are some of the differences? I've looked into a little bit.
Yeah, so it runs the gamut, but at its very basic, most basic level, rucking is so simple. It's really just putting weight in a backpack and moving. Okay. So, you know, if you're not into running, or you need to be, you know, having kids come along with you, you know, or, you know, you just want to go out by yourself or with your dog, you know, being able to just put on a rucksack, it's just basically an alternative form of exercise, you know, and it's great for you because there's not a ton of impact compared to running, like on your joints. And the benefits are great. You build muscle by also burning calories, you know, 3 times as much as walking. So it's something that, you know, it's a great sort of, you know, active recovery. It's also, you know, something you can do to strength train, you know, because we say like the ruck can be like a gym on your back, you know, because it's like you can use it as like, you know, to do squats or presses or, you know, kettlebell swings or something like that. So it's really versatile. And then you can also put your stuff in it as well. So the events we have are, you know, as simple as I've described as, you know, just joining a ruck club and, you know, just going on sort of easy rucks. You know, we don't do anything over 5 miles in our ruck club, but our normal ones are about 3 miles because we have kids that go. And then, you know, we've got these star course ones, or this are just rucking events, different distances, 5K, 10K, 15K, 12 miler, 26.2 miles, and then 50 miler, which is a real treat. It is 26.2 you can kind of do, and it's like you're like, I feel good about this, you know, even moving at a quick pace. But the 50 miler is like a marathon. It doesn't matter how much you've trained or how fit you are. It's instead of mile 20, it's mile 40 around, you know, in that area where it doesn't matter. You're going to feel it. Mm-hmm. But it's pretty awesome. It feels like you really accomplished something afterwards. And then our signature events, the ones we started with, a tough event, a tough challenge. It's, you know, 10 to 12 hours. It goes overnight. It's, you know, you have your weighted ruck and there's a lot of PT, and there's also just the unknown factor. You don't know your cadre. You know, he might be someone who just loves making people squat. He might make you go in the water a lot, you know. Mm-hmm. It's just it depends on sort of the terrain and who you have, you know, as your cadre, who are all, you know, special operations guys with combat experience. So there's a lot of teaching and storytelling and kind of leadership lessons along the way. And versions of that tough are the light, which is 4 to 6 hours. So just, you know, a little bit of the same, but it's just not as much time. And then you have the heavy, which is like the ultimate team building experience, 24 hours, you know. I have not done one yet. I've you know, I've almost been able to do one and just haven't had the chance to, but it's something that's on my list. It's like something that you have to, you know, you need to make sure you don't just show up. You know, you kind of need to know a little bit about it, I think. I mean, there are cases of people that that's their first event and they look back at it saying, wow, that's why not many people do that sort of thing. And then at the pinnacle, you have our like selection event, 48 hours, team assessment, which is basically like selection, except it's with a teammate, another 48-hour event. And those are the outliers of our event. The other ones are all kind of team based, and it's it's about the experience really matters. Those are just a little bit more competitive. They're like some of the hardest endurance events that there are out there, and it's really that kind of pays to be a winner mentality. But the other ones are about really pushing yourself and making it accessible for people to try to do it, when what works best for them. So that's what we do. We do a lot of those events, and we even have some, specialty events that are more survival based and, firearms training on the side, which are really cool, but they're definitely more specialized.
Yeah, it's really evolved. I think a big part of this is not just the exercise, but it's getting uncomfortable. There's so much to be said for, breaking out of that comfort zone that most of us live inside, right? And you're forced to get way out of it. And actually I read a story of yours where your husband and you ended up in the Hudson River, freezing temperatures, and I'll let you tell the story briefly if you want to, but again, it's just about personal growth, right? It sucked for you, right? It was horrible, miserable, but that's where the growth lies, right? That's where it's at.
Right. Oh yeah. It is all about, we say, about getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's life, right?
Embrace the suck, right? Yeah.
Embrace the suck, because life is, so much of what we do in our daily lives is about trying to make life easier. And granted, like if you're like the woman that I saw, carrying a basket of mangoes, 8 miles one way to the village to sell it, you are interested in making your life easier, right? And there's a difference, in terms of human evolution. But we get to a point where we've gone too far, where we drive everywhere, we're not moving enough, we're not seeing enough people in person. We're not eating things that are like real food,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to sort of keep wanting to push an easy button and make your life easier. Oh, that'll be easier. Let me just do that. When really we have to remember to incorporate some of these hard things in our life. I read this great article recently about this guy who said, hey, you need to supercharge your day. Just take a cold shower. And this is something I hate. Goes back to the Hudson River, the third challenge. It was like 17 degrees in New York, and Jason made us go in the Hudson River for this tough, one of the first ever tough challenges. And I thought I was prepared because I kind of had a little bit of an inside track at that point, being who I was and who he was. And he waited for me to get all my dry clothes on that I had packed. And he put me back in, and I was so mad because I was like, I actually was really cold. We had 2 guys drop because of hypothermia that event, because they just started showing some signs, and we wanted to be safe. So Jason sent them packing in a cab, and I was on that borderline. Like I really, the ruck, carrying that weight on my back helped me warm up, but it took a while, and I probably could have. I could be talking to you today saying I didn't finish, but I powered through, and the sun came out at the right time, and it worked out. But, going back to, taking that cold shower, like we have to find ways to bring the uncomfortable back, to a certain extent where it's reasonable. I'm not saying go live in the desert without supplies or something, radical like that. But, biking to work, rucking, throwing on a weighted backpack when you're going to be out with your kids, so it's giving you a little bit extra, finding ways to, get muddy. Like, when you're out playing your spy game, doing like some low crawls, it's not going to be comfortable. You're going to get more dirty, but, you're going to go back and be like, wow, that was fun. I can shower. I can be clean again. These things aren't permanent. But they are this type of, when it's a safe environment, teaching life skills. Hey, kids, you see what we're doing now? If you ever were in a burning fire, this is what you do, and it's like, they will remember those kind of lessons.
Yeah, for sure. Just last month, we went to Ocean City, Maryland,
And I do it every year now. But yeah, the water was 41 degrees, freezing. I stripped down into my bathing suit, ran out there into the water. People were wearing, jackets and stuff, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy. But I went in, my legs went numb within about 10 seconds, but I went under, came out, and it's just about getting uncomfortable. And, nobody ever wants to do that stuff, but, it gives you that little bit of edge. And yeah.
I mean, you weren't going to, be there for so long that you were going to be in some sort of danger.
Right,
We just did a polar plunge ruck where, people do that sort of thing. And it's a good exercise, right? It's a good reminder of, gosh, we live so comfortably. And while that is a blessing, it can also come back to hurt us in times of, when things start to change. I mean, I'm not a doomsday kind of person. I'm an optimist, but at the same time, I'm an optimist that likes to plan and likes to be ready and prepared and to actually think about these things. So, when you think like, gosh, we're only like sometimes a few layers above chaos. And, we see it in Florida when there's hurricanes, toilet paper flies off the shelves, water flies off the shelf. People start acting in this sort of self-centered, self-preservation, basic, kind of primal way. And, part of our humanity is fighting against those types of things in a way that's practical and safe for others. Right. So to be a responsible citizen, but also to prepare yourself and your family and loved ones and other people that you meet along the way to be like, hey, we're staying fit, and we're going to make sure that, when the time comes, we're going to be able to help someone that's not in need. We're going to be able to reach out and check on them and make sure that they're good. I mean, there's in crises, and in situations for natural disasters and even man-made ones, you see both sides. You see a lot of communities coming together, a lot of beautiful parts. That's the best. And then you see the other flip side of, people being selfish or not wanting to take responsibility the way that others would. And the more people we can get to think about, to be prepared and to be, and these are our children included, right? You're basically preparing for the future. Are you going to be ready when these types of things happen? And if you're raising confident kids that see their parents not panicking and watching the news 24/7 and just saying, hey, here are the facts. This is what we'll do if this happens, then that's how they will learn to act. I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you've inspired me to do one of these events with my girls. So I've got to get that on on the map here. So anyway, this has been awesome. I've actually really enjoyed talking with you. I feel like we could probably continue talking for another hour about this kind of stuff. But so I'll drop some information about you, links wherever you want. Where do you want people to find more about, what you guys are doing?
Oh yeah, just our site has a lot of information on it. It's GORUCK.com, and we've got a great news blog that we're putting out a lot of content these days, and there'll be even more coming. And it's all this type of stuff, Steve. It's like ways of life, and community-based stuff. There's even some parenting sort of stories being shared, and it's our plan is just to educate, and to share other people's stories. And because we really think that our lives are better because of the people we share it with. And that's something that, spans across all these categories of fitness, wellness, community, challenges, we're all, whole people that have a lot of different, we're so many different facets to us. And so, it's not just about, like you said, it's not a quick fix. It's not just some fad, that's just going to change our lives. It's really about saying, it's just going to be a little step forward every time. And doing it, with others is so much more empowering.
Yeah, for sure. And I love the mission. Just love your mission. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time. I know I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you. And, I hope I get to see you and your daughters at an event sometime or wrecking the streets of Maryland.
You will. You will.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I'll be in touch here. And again, just I really can admire what you guys are doing. So thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. And remember, if you want more information, check out the Fit Dad Basecamp group on Facebook. And don't forget to stop by fitdadnation.com. Until next time, keep kicking ass and taking the next step. You can do this, Dad.